You know, one of the great things about doing this recording videos is that it gives me a freedom to do what the hell I want to do. There was a time in the past when I suppose as a young, maybe um, insecure person teaching English, it was easy to be intimidated by the idea that other people knew more than you did, or that their opinion carried more weight than yours does. I always carry that with me. Like I'm at the game a long time now, as you know, but I always carry that with me because I want you to feel that you're allowed to engage with this material on your own terms. And I'm starting talking about that because what I'm gonna do in this short video is respond to a question I was asked by one of you about the poems Kinsale and Grandfather by Derek Mahon. Now, if you look at the YouTube page, which you may be on right now, there's loads of Derek Mahon content. If you look at the Grinds 360 page, there's loads of Derek Mahon content. But what I would do with each poet is I pick 6 poems, and across fifth and sixth year, I go through those 6 poems and have those ready, in the hope that my students would, depending on their level, their interest in English, their ambition in the subject, would have between 4 and 6 poems prepared for the exam. I don't teach these 2 poems. Um, no particular reason. I just like the other 6 that I teach. But I was asked to make a video on these. And while I know Grandfather quite well, because it's prescribed for ordinary level, so I've taught it in the past when I've had students taking the ordinary level paper. I've never taught Kinsale before, and I read it literally for the first time about 20 minutes ago. And it's a lovely poem. Um, I know a fair amount about Derek Mahon. Um, I know a fair amount about Kinsale. It's a place I'm not very familiar with, but it's a place I know. I know the history of it, and I know what it's like today. And this is a lovely poem. Um, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my read on it, and it may um, chime with what your teacher tells you the poem is about and your teacher's interpretation, and it may not. And to quote a famous line that I deliver quite often, my name is Paul and I don't care. So hopefully, as I go through the poem, you might take some of what I have to say on board, and it might help you when you're sitting there, trying to write an essay in response to whatever stimulus statement they have on Mahon, if Mahon comes up in your mock exams or your leaving cert. But most of all, I just hope you like a bit of poetry. I, I know that's a forlorn hope, but I'd love to think you did. Okay, let's have a quick look. So Kinsale, first of all, like the Chinese restaurant in Portrush, like Rathlin, like Antarctica, it's a poem about place. Kinsale is a place in County Cork, and it's a place of huge significance to Derek Mahon. That looks like Go Cork. That would be not what I meant to write. Because, as you know, he was from Belfast. I'm sure you know that. And you might also know that he left Belfast as a young person and went to study in Dublin and kind of travelled a bit. He deals with concerns like that, particularly in Ecclesiastes, that idea of being separated from home. But Kinsale was a place where, in his kind of later life, Mahon died recently enough in the last few years, but in his later life, from kind of the last 20 years, he found a place where he called home. Kinsale is a place where there's like a lot of artistic people, a lot of writers, a community of artists down there. And he found himself at home. And there's a real sense in this poem of that sense of home, of that sense of finding contentment in a place. And I think that he does communicate that very cleverly through what I see in the poem, which is a direct contrast between this description here and this description here. There's no doubt in my mind that the imagery which is nature imagery, but that imagery is used to reflect mood. In the images of nature and the weather, they reflect the mood. And in that sense, you can argue that this poem is an example of what we call pathetic fallacy. So think about King Lear, the storm, and what all that represents. When a writer uses nature to reflect the mood. And the opening sequence is all about rain. The kind of rain we knew was a thing of the past. Note the monosyllabic language. Words of one syllable. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 words and 12 syllables. The language is very, very, very direct, very simple. And he's immediately thinking about things that have gone, things of the past. The kind of rain we knew was a thing of the past. And then he describes the rain. Deep, delving, dark, deliberate, you would say. And of course, he brings emphasis to that description, very descriptive little line through the use of alliteration. Think about what that deep delving means. I cycle to work every day, and over the last couple of weeks, I just haven't. I'm sure most of you have can relate to this. I've had a bit of some sort of bug in me, cold, can't shake it, wasn't able to shake it, and just this weekend I felt much better, recovered, and I got up this morning and I looked out the I looked out the window, and it was bucketing down. And I said to my wife, and she was very surprised when I said it. I said, I'm going to drive today. Because I didn't want to be out in that deep, delving rain. You know, that kind of rain where no matter how well prepared you are, you're never going to stay dry. It's going to get down into your skin. So that's a very, very, very cleverly chosen, piece of description. Those adjectives, deep delving, really should be, I think it is in the poem actually, a compound word. Just let me check. This is my, I typed it in, but I just want to check that it is a compound word in the poem. I don't want to steer you wrong. As I said, I don't teach this poem. Yeah, a compound word, like where a writer makes up a new word by adding two words together. Again, always a sign of a writer's inventiveness. But like that deep delving gets down into your skin. That's an adjective. Dark. There's a sense of darkness. Deliberate. Like it's almost like it's there to cause you misery. It's very, very, very evocative of a miserable, rainy Irish day. But he says it's a thing of the past, browsing on Spire and Bogland. And the reference to Spire and Bogland, for me, these are like allusions to Irish culture. The spire of the church. Kinsale is a place which is resonant with history. It's a place where there was a famous battle during the 9 Years' War, the turn of the 15 into the 1600s, the 16 into the 17th century. Ireland is a place where, punctuated by spires, signs of our Christian cultural heritage. And yet that Christian cultural heritage has been at the root of our division. Our hatreds, our wars, and our conflicts between Catholic and Protestant, and the sectarianism that Mahon is so powerfully aware of as an Ulster Presbyterian living in Catholic or nationalist Southern Ireland. But these things are a thing of the past. This rain, that deep, delving, dark, deliberate rain that soaked our spires and bogland, or boglands for someone like Mahon, so close to, in age and in profile to Seamus Heaney, and that awareness of the bog as a a part of who we are as a nation. But it's in the past. And I think that this is really important. I think Mahon in this poem is talking about darkness being behind us. And now, in the second half of the poem, there's brightness and optimism. Our sky blue, I mistyped, it should be slates, are steaming in the sun. What a gorgeous image. It's photographic. It's arguably cinematic, because when you read it, you can see it, and it's moving. Like the cinema is the moving pictures, because you can see the sky blue slates of the roofs of the houses in Kinsale, and then you can see the the rain has fallen, but the sun is now evaporating the water, and there's steam rising up, and it's like a cleansing image. It's gorgeous. Now there's brightness, now there's heat, now there's warmth. The darkness is over. And he describes this, again, extraordinarily lovely image. Our yachts tinkling and dancing in the bay. By the way, I marked the S's there. See that sibilant? So I mentioned the alliteration, deep, delving, dark, deliberate. Then you have sibilants of sky, slate, steaming, sun. So all of these beautiful skills, techniques being used by him to paint a picture. This is such a painterly poem, a small poem, but a beautiful poem. I don't normally teach it, but you know, it's a beautiful poem. And the image of the yachts in the marina down there, and the sound of them tinkling. I love that onomatopoeia of tinkling. If you've ever been near a marina where yachts are kept, you do hear that tinkling sound. It's like the cables or the ropes or the if you're a sailor, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like they're banging in the breeze against the masts of the boats, and you do hear that sound in the breeze, and it's very, very evocative. And we have this gorgeous image of possibility and freedom, of boats in the harbour and the sun shining and the lightness of the sound of the tinkling, and the image of dance. Like, what is dance if it's not a celebration and expression of freedom? The mood is completely different here. Something has fundamentally changed. There's optimism. And then he says this beautiful simile, like racehorses. You know, racehorses, ready to run, ready to go, strong and magnificent and proud and, you know, emblematic of positivity. And for me, what Mahon is doing in this poem, and again, as I said at the beginning, this is the great thing about what I do here, because I don't give a god damn if you disagree with me. It's what I see, and it's what I want you to write with the freedom to say what you want to bloody say, as long as you can back it up. And for me, this is, as I said, an exercise in beautiful description. That's number one. But number two, thematically, it's about change. It's about the shift from the darkness to the light, from the rain to the warmth of the sunshine. And in terms of symbolism, I think for Mahon, he's thinking on two levels. He's thinking about the Ireland he lives in, where the darkness of the past is now in the rear view mirror. He's writing this poem in the 2000s when the conflict, the 30-year internecine feckin' civil war that too many of you don't know enough about, and too many of you think you know about, and get the wool pulled over your eyes by bullshit artists and liars about, the truth of what went on. It wasn't pleasant for anybody. And it certainly wasn't glorious. And it's over now when he writes this poem. And there's a sense of optimism for Ireland that we're entering a new period in our history. I think that's lovely. And that's why I think the last section, we contemplate at last shining windows, a future forbidden to no one. Look at the optimism of that line. Shining windows, brightness, openness. The future is forbidden to no one. We're no longer, judging people and excluding people and privileging some while punishing others, penalising others. The penal laws. That this is a new Ireland, and he doesn't say any of that here, but it's there in the poem, and I see it, and I think it's really meaningful. But if you don't want to talk about that, you just want to talk about Mahon, and this is a personal poem, like all poetry is personal. So when Mahon writes about, you know, um, Bruce Ismay, yeah, he's writing about other people, but he's writing about his view of the world and the importance of understanding others and, not condemning without understanding. Or when he's writing about, you know, when he's writing about Antarctica and the story of Captain or of Lawrence Oates and the idea of how Lawrence Oates was so, you know, worthy of admiration. Sublime is the term he uses, but also at the same time ridiculous. And this is Mahon like his personal view of humanity, capable of such extremes. Well, here again, I think there's personal. Here, I think there's a sense that whatever was going on in his life, and I'd be happy for somebody to drop a message into this here and say, "Here, Paul, I knew Mahon, and you're talking through your hole. I don't care. This is the freedom I have, and the freedom I want you to have. We are allowed to interpret." I think the poem suggests that Mahon has found in Kinsale a place of peace. I think that in the poem we get a sense of a man maybe around my age, maybe a little bit older, who's put some of the struggles of youth and of middle age behind him in the rearview mirror. Some of the rain is over. He's never gonna feel that kind of rain again. It's a thing of the past. And now he gets to sit back and enjoy the sunshine, living in this beautiful West Cork town. It's a decent poem. I think now I've talked myself into adding it to my list. So I hope you find that one useful. Now, the next one, I'll be really quick. This is, again, I'm making this video because it was a request from a student. I can't always reply because I'm busier than, as you know, I'm a very busy man. But this is, I'm happy to do stuff like this. When you ask me to talk about poetry, this is Paul's happy place. Again, this is a very personal poem. It's about his actual grandfather. I really don't think there's a hell of a lot to this poem. It's an early poem by the poet. I don't think it stacks up to some of the other poems by Mahon on the course. It is reflective and personal, as I said. And for me, the only really interesting thing about the poem is that it is a beautifully drawn pen portrait. So one of the things about Mahon, if they ask you a question, and they have in the past used the word narrative, he's a narrative poet. He creates scenarios. He brings you to places in your imagination: Antarctica, Rathlin Island, Belfast with tied up swings, Kinsale. Here he brings you to his family home, and he introduces you to his granddad. The same way as he introduces us to Bruce Ismay, taking his cocaine and seeing no one, or Lawrence Oates, or the fanatic and as it should be, or the proprietor of the Chinese restaurant looking out onto the sea and seeing that ideogram on a sea cloud. I still don't know what it means, but I love it. Image from the Chinese restaurant in Portrush. So yeah, I'll read it really quickly. It's a sonnet. So you have your octave, which is your 8-line sequence, and then you have your sestet, which is your 6-line sequence. So technically it's very adept, very skillfully written. Adept means skillful. What's it going to do to that? Oh, makes me look like I have lovely handwriting. And he's remembering an event when he was a kid. His granddad worked in the shipyards, As I said, Mahon is from the kind of the Ulster Protestant Unionist tradition, and his granddad worked in the shipyards, Harland and Wolff, up in Belfast. And as an older man, he entered his dotage, which is a phrase that I think has gone out of fashion, but it's got to do with somebody who's maybe older and isn't quite as sharp as they used to be. And he came to live with Mahon's family when Mahon was a child, and here he comes. They brought him in on a stretcher from the world. Great opening line. If you're talking about his narrative approach, that's a lovely, engaging opening line. Wounded but humorous. That I like. That I like. Sorry. Isn't it lovely? And so wounded in the immediate term, it refers to that he was injured at work, and he's taken it with good humor. But there's more to it than that. I think it's about a life lived which was difficult, a life maybe of poverty, of hard work, of disappointment. We're all wounded in some way, and this is one of the things that Mahon does, is he explores the complexity of human nature. And he soon recovered. And then this lovely, lovely, lovely line: boiler rooms, row upon row of gantries rolled away to reveal the landscape of a childhood only he can recapture. So you have the alliteration again there of the or. So I've marked a couple of them, but I missed a couple of them. Rooms, row, row, rolled, reveal, and recapture. So again, the alliteration serves to, yes, create rhythm, but also simply to draw our attention to the line, to make my handwriting is, I can't get over it. To make the line, my thing with alliteration, and everybody's different. Obviously, we know what it is. It's the repetition of initial sounds, and it creates rhythm. But it's more than that. For me, when you're reading a line that's alliterative, the repeated initial sounds, it makes you slow down. It makes you say the words with a little bit more deliberation. So it causes you to focus more on the line. The colloquial phrase I often use is, it makes the line pop off the page, and I think that's true of that technique. But we have this lovely juxtaposition again between the world, or worlds, inhabited by his grandfather, the world of the shipyards, boiler rooms, gantries. Gantries, like, scaffolding. When you're building a ship, and there'd be the scaffolding around the ship and the different workers. And if you've ever been to the Belfast, the Titanic quarter, they talk about all the rivets that they put into the ships and so on. That's what it is. It's an industrial scene. And there's this image of the grandfather's life being, that industrial scene. But then when he comes to live with them, he's kind of, that's behind him, and he's now kind of almost back in his childhood because he's entered his dotage. And this childhood is something that only he can recapture, because nobody else that's there could share it with him. So it's a lovely image of a man at the end of his life thinking of the beginning of his life, of the connections between the different stages of our life, and how our childhood is what forms us, and that never goes away. I think that's, again, as I say, that's what I see when I read. I think it's lovely. I think it's personal, but again, like everything Mahon writes, it's philosophical. Even on cold mornings, he was up at 6 with a block of wood or a box of nails, discreetly up to no good, or banging around the house like a 4-year-old. And of course, if you want to mark that, that's a lovely simile. And banging is another example of onomatopoeia. So really, he's capturing the idea of his granddad, no longer working, but still, ingrained. My dad was in the Air Corps from the time he was 16 till the time he was about 40. And he's 80 now, so that was like a lifetime ago when he retired. But the man still, when he stands still, he still stands with his hand behind his back, the way he was trained in the army when he was at ease. And he still has the shiniest shoes of anybody I've ever seen. And he will not go out the door without having his shoes shined. So it's got to do with conditioning, I suppose. And the grandfather gets up at 6 o'clock every morning, because that's what he did his whole working life. And the grandfather keeps busy, has to be doing something, has to feel useful, even if it's like messing around with a block of wood and a box of nails. There's a humanity to this man, you know. And he was a bloody nuisance around the house, by keeping everybody awake and like a 4-year-old. But of course, 4-year-olds can be a nuisance, but we also love them and want to protect them. And that there's a sense of that love that the poet feels for his grandfather here. Never there when you call, but after dark you hear his great boots thumping in the hall. That's again another lovely example of onomatopoeia. And in he comes, as cute as they come. And that, again, another simile. That's a little colloquialism. As cute as they come means clever. Sorry. Delete. So there's a sense of him enjoying his grandfather's playfulness. But again, I want to posit something to you. I want to ask you, do you think that this could be the case? When he says he's never there when you call, is he now thinking about, and I'm saying that I'm thinking about my own granny. And you might be thinking about someone that you love and has passed away. That idea, like they're gone. I can't, Seamus Heaney's poem, A Call, if you haven't read that poem, it's not on your leaving cert, it's an amazing poem. About the idea of keeping connections with people even after they're gone. But never there when you call, but always there as well. You hear his great boots thumping in the hall, and in he comes, as cute as they come. And for me, I think that's about the connections between the past and the present. I think it's about the connection that as Mahon writes this poem, he's an adult, and the grandfather he knew when he was a child is long gone, long in his box, long in his grave. But he's always with Mahon. You'll always hear his boots thumping in the hall. He'll always smile at his mischievous nature, as cute as they come, because as long as Mahon's alive, something of his grandfather is too in his memory. That's what we call a universal theme. I don't know what that's going to go like. It's fine. Each night his shrewd eyes bolt the door and set the clock against the future. And then his light goes out. And again, this image of light going out, has to be a reference to not only the night when he puts his light out, but also like death and passing. Nothing escapes him. He escapes us all. And it's a lovely conclusion to the poem. I think it's about identity. The repetition of escapes is important. There's a sense of loss there. I mean, when we think of escape, we think of, relief. Nothing escapes him means that he was clever and, he didn't let anything slide by. He escapes us all is a sense of like, we've lost him. So the last line of the poem, I think, condenses Mahon's feelings about his grandfather into, one very simple 7-word line. And it's all about admiration and grief. So if that contrasts with what your teacher said about grandfather, remember, my name is Paul and I don't care, but I love poetry. And I wish that we taught it differently. I wish you were able to enjoy it. But then if you weren't studying it for an exam, would you read it at all? And doesn't it enrich our lives a little bit, even if you hate it? Hope you found that useful.